Welcome to another episode of Wednesday Toast, a podcast about comic book stuff where we talk about all kinds of comic book related stuff. My name is Lex, and on this week's episode of the podcast, we are interviewing writer, artist Tony Fleecs. You probably know him from Stray Dogs, Local Man, soon to be Feral, and Uncanny Valley. Now, when we first started this new podcast, we wanted to geek out. We wanted to talk to our friends about comic book stuff. We wanted to talk about comic book creators. And we're truly honored that Tony was our first interviewee. So since it is our first interview ever, you're going to have to bear with us. We got through it. It was a ton of fun, and I hope you enjoy it.
It is Wednesday, my dudes.
Welcome, everybody. On this episode of the show, we are talking to Tony Fleecs. Fleece? I've looked it up. Fleecs. I went through like 9 different YouTube videos, interviews, and every time it got to your name, it just I think
Random.
a lot of people just got really quiet. So if they said it wrong, no one's gonna know. Yeah. So I'm just gonna say Tony and I are really good friends, and we got our friend Tony on this week, and I'm really excited to talk to him.
Bill Sienkiewicz puts it like a pronunciation in his bio on social media. Maybe it's time we do that. At first I thought it was presumptuous, but now it does come off pretty often, very often. So please.
There it is. Before we let you introduce yourself, I want to give just a little sidebar on our relationship with your material. I'm a huge fan. I really dig writers and artists. I just think it's like a phenomenal thing, and it's something that a lot of people can't pull off, and you do very well. I also want to kick it off by saying that when I first read Stray Dogs, we talked about the show, our old show, before we started recording, but I didn't pick it up first issue, but I would see all these covers for Stray Dogs, and I was like, I got to get these. After the second month, I was like, I got to get this damn book. And I fell in love with it. And it was instantly the subject matter. I knew that I had to bring it on to the show, specifically because I'm not an animal person, right? And not in the sense of I hate animals. I'm more
he's
of
just a regular. He's a human person.
Yeah, right.
That's what he's saying.
2 legs.
I never would want to see anybody harm an animal or anything. That freaks me out and makes me really, really nervous. I'm even getting the sweats saying it. But
I think you need to say that. I feel like that just sort of goes without saying.
Just a disclaimer for anybody out there.
Somebody says they're not like a dog person, I don't immediately jump to. I bet he likes to watch people hurt animals.
Yeah.
Just to make it very clear, I don't want anybody to.
I'm not a dog person. Oh, so like a serial killer? I get it.
Yeah. So my wife is an animal person. I mean, she grew up with 9 dogs in the house, ferrets, all kinds of animals. In fact, she just asked me last week if she could get a chicken for her birthday, and I couldn't even wrap my head around that. So I'm still processing.
Just one chicken?
Yeah, just one. And I don't even know why. I don't know why. I just walked out of the room just with my head hanging down. And so I'm surrounded by these people that are animal people. Simon is a big, sappy animal person. So when I read the first issue of Stray Dogs, I was like, this is going to be perfect just to see the reaction from Simon when he reads this. And it was great. It was great. Simon, what did you think about Stray Dogs? Because when I told him we were interviewing you, he was like, oh, great.
No, I reread it the other day, and it's really, I don't know, it's really interesting. I loved the art style that you went with. It was really cool, very reminiscent of All Dogs Go to Heaven and those kind of movies. There was one thing that stuck out to me again, and I remember, so we're country people. Wichita Falls isn't huge, but the surrounding area where, Alex's wife is from and some of my family's from is real small. And, people take care of their animals, but they're also farm people. You know what I'm saying? I'm not going to go into detail on that. But so someone shooting a dog with a shotgun is ugh, that's rough to see. But I mean, that's, I don't know.
Yeah.
But
and they don't take them to Banfield at the end of their life to put them down.
Yeah. but going through and seeing the like murder shed and like the skinned dog and then the mounted dog's heads, I was like, oh yeah, this guy's like really fucked up. That's right. Yeah, he is a serial killer, but he's like really crazy. So yeah, it was just interesting to that's definitely an indicator.
Yeah.
But yeah,
That should be a giveaway that somebody is really fucked up. Yeah.
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 And weirdly, my wife loved it. She read it 2 days ago, and I mean, quickly. She said she was done with it. And I was like, I guess I just read slow. Is what I, because she blazed through it and she loved it. And I did not expect, I thought I was going to be able to make fun of her because she was crying, but she loved it and she wanted to read more. And then I told her about Feral, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And so I thought that I was going to get more of a reaction out of these sappy animal people, but it didn't happen. They ended up loving it.
You're just like a cruel animal hater that just sneaks up.
I don't want to hurt animals. I want to hurt people's feelings that
Friends,
love
yeah.
animals.
Well, I mean, I feel like this should have worked for you. I don't know what happened really.
Yeah, no.
You know, generally would get pretty good reactions from people, but I do hear about a lot of people. These are wife comics for sure. They're like partner comics, you know, gateway comics.
Yeah.
And we didn't really expect that going. I guess we didn't really know who we were making it for besides ourselves.
Right.
We just Trish and I, who drew the comic, and Tone and Brad, the team behind it, we just all sort of we had a vision. You said all dogs go to heaven. Like when I had the idea of basically I had the idea about the serial killer first, and then the idea to tell the story from the perspective of the dogs was sort of like the second or third thing. I thought it was like it sort of came together real quickly. But as soon as I knew I wanted to tell the story from the dog's POV, I knew that I wanted it to look like All Dogs Go to Heaven, like that, like a Don Bluth movie, because I just had this memory of those movies being so scary when they had to be. Like Land Before Time got real scary, Secret of Nim got real scary, like all those Don Bluth movies.
Yeah,
you know, really had scary stuff in them. So we wanted to lean into that, and that's how I ended up asking Trish to draw it. Is I was looking for I drew cartoony, like I could probably have drawn it, but I wanted somebody that could specifically do characters like that, like draw them like Disney or Don Bluth characters, and she really had a handle on that.
Yeah, she knocks it out of the park. And you've
One
been
thing
in the
that
industry. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, one thing that I kind of noticed, and it finally came to me, you know, normally when you see things about serial killers, you see the cruelty to animals first, right? That's the indicator. But I think it's interesting that, like in Stray Dogs, it's so much later. Like you're finding out about the murders way before you see the cruelty to animals. So I think that that's kind of a interesting reveal there.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a couple of things. It's one, I didn't want to focus. I didn't want to do like the Jeffrey Dahmer comic or the Ed Gein comic, you know, where you're like going in depth into what these killers are, you know, because I feel like if you just say like if you lead the reader to think enough that there's a serial killer, you sort of show him the secret room, you show him some flashback stuff, but like let them fill in those blanks. Like I laid out like a basic, here's what this killer's deal is, but I definitely don't have like a document written down of like, here's how he kills, here's what his thing is, all that stuff. Like I was just like, let's keep it vague. But he might be somebody that didn't even hurt animals, you know, like the way I think about it is he loved the dogs, he kept the dogs, like his whole deal was keeping those dogs. And then when they were bad to him or when they got old and died or whatever, he just still kept them. And so like he liked the dogs the specific way that they were his, you know, they were his dogs and they were good to him and he was good to them and stuff. But if they started to act ornery or whatever, then he would, I guess, put them down and stuff them, and then he could still keep the dogs, you know.
Kind of like an extreme animal lover, someone that loves animals so much that they hate humans, but they'll you know sympathize with the animals. That's
and a collector too, you know.
Simon blurs his background. We did this sort of backwards. I know we like to go on sidebar, so that kind of got away from us. You've been in the industry for a while. You worked on a lot of things. Local Man is one of my recent. I'm obsessed about it. I don't think Simon's had a chance to read it yet, but when he was collecting comic books, it was in like the 90s, and it was very, you know, Wildstorm days, very Valiant days, and that's a lot of what Local Man is, and so I'm gonna send him my first volume. It's really really good. Can you tell
Thank you.
our audience a little bit about yourself for people that may not know?
I'm Tony Fleecs. I write and draw comics. I've been in the industry for about since 2006, so almost 20 years going on. But a huge chunk of that time, I was doing licensed comics and kids comics.
Mm-hmm.
I drew My Little Pony comics and like a shitload of those, but then also Star Wars comics and Rick and Morty comics and just a bunch of stuff. But I would here and there, whenever I could, I would make creator-owned comics too, because I grew up on Image Comics, I sort of always figured like that's the way you're supposed to, you should do this stuff to make a living, but eventually you have to focus on the stuff that's your own stuff so that you can, have some sort of equity in it and have some sort of, future with it, hopefully.
Yeah.
But so I did a book called Jeff Steinberg and Champion of Earth in like 2014 or 2015 at Oni Press that nobody knows about. That was a comedy book. And I did another book right after Stray Dogs came out called Time Shopper that was a comedy book. And those a real tough sell.
Yeah.
Like people they don't want to laugh so much. They like it more if you scare them or if it's action packed and stuff. Sometimes you can hide the laughs in, like with Local Man, we hide a lot of laughs on the
Oh yeah, it's
inside
perfect,
the
man.
dark exterior. But yeah, so I made My Little Pony comics for many years, and then while I was doing that, I had this idea for Stray Dogs, and I just started putting it together. Like I had friends that worked in the studio with me, and they made indie comics, and I had been working, for IDW and other licensed publishers for so long that I sort of forgot I was supposed to be making indie comics. So I saw them making their books, and I was like, "Oh, right, I got to get going on this if I'm gonna, I'm not getting any younger."
Yeah.
So I had the idea for Stray Dogs, and I found, like I said, I found Trish Forstner, who was also working on My Little Pony comics, and we just started putting it together. And then Image put that out in 2021. And it was a surprise big hit. And so then I got opportunities to do a lot of other stuff, and all that is sort of the stuff that's out right now or about to come out right now. So like Local Man came out of that, and Feral, the Stray Dogs follow-up came out of that, and this book Uncanny Valley that I'm launching at Boom in a couple of weeks also came out of that. And I write Army of Darkness, and that also, like they had hired me for years to do same deal, like licensed comics, like draw stuff for them or do covers or whatever. But once Stray Dogs came out, they were like, "Hey, you want to write Army of Darkness?"
Jeez, that's awesome. Yeah, I heard
Yeah.
about the Army of Darkness book. I need to check that out because I love that franchise. That's one that I have not
You
read
dig
of
it.
yours yet. I need to check that one out.
It's going to be like 12, 13 issues, and it's basically like the sequel that they always said they wanted to make. Because at the end of the original movie, Ash like sleeps too long and wakes up in this like post-apocalyptic future, and they cut the ending for like the American edit, the American release, and the ending that where he just goes back to the S Mart and that Deadite attacks him and he grabs that girl and says "Hail to the King, baby," all that stuff.
Yeah.
Like we just sort of made a sequel where it's both of those endings happen, and we explain how they all fit together and how it all works, and then leads us to like the way in the future and all kinds of sort of exciting magic and horror stuff. It's great. I say it's the person who made it.
Yeah, right. I can't wait to check that out. One thing I think about it on Local Man a lot, and listening to some other interviews that I've heard, and your work on like Stray Dogs. It seems to be like the way you collaborate with other creators, something I really dig. You and Seeley on Local Man specifically knock it out of the park. Do you guys trade off art duties on that, or is it one person does flashbacks?
Yeah. Seeley draws the flashbacks. So like on the flip side where it looks like an old Image comic, he draws all that stuff.
Okay.
I draw all the stuff where it's him in his hometown, like just the sort of like crimey looking photo ref stuff.
Yeah.
I do that stuff. But then we do stuff where, like, if you read Local Man Gold, where there's like superheroes and him on the same page together, like that's just we're just sharing the pages back and forth and both drawing on it. And super
That's awesome.
collaborative. We do this thing where whenever the whole story is about this guy who used to be a superhero in the 90s, and now he's fired and canceled, and he has to move back home with his mom and dad in the Midwest in the small town that he's from. and everybody there hates him, and then people start getting murdered, and he has to like see if he can. He's not allowed to do superhero stuff anymore. Like legally, he's not allowed, and he has to see if he can help figure out what's going on, stop these murders without being super, but that would just by trying to be helpful or whatever. And everything sort of goes wrong for this guy. But whenever he gets one off, when he has like a good moment, we always have Tim draw that part. So like he sort of gets to be heroic again. He'll still have his normal clothes on, but he'll look super for just a second,
Yeah.
Super fun.
Yeah, you can definitely see, and the reason why I wanted to bring up like your collaboration style, because in Local Man Gold, you can see that. You can see it through almost every page, especially like when you guys bring in those old Image characters in and they're illustrated in that old style. I mean, it somehow fits perfectly. So it's like, is that just the way you like to create these creator-owned books? It's like super collaborative, back and forth.
The cool thing about Image Comics is that it's the most freedom of almost anywhere. Like we really just make the whole thing and turn it in, and they print it. And so with that, like Tim and I sort of love the idea of trying to do stuff that you couldn't get away with anywhere else, or just that it would take so much like emails and stuff. Like literally, like we can just go like, oh, let's try this, and then just do it. We text each other back and forth or call each other or whatever, and just do whatever in this comic. Whereas anywhere else, it would be like, oh, let's check with the so-and-so and see if that works. And, so it gives us the freedom to do a lot of stuff like that. Where like, yeah, we want to put like Joan from Love Everlasting in our superhero comic. Well, Tim just calls Tom King and goes like, hey, can we use Joan? And then that's it, like we want to put Boof from Boof and the Bruise Crew in this thing.
I wondered how that worked. Did you have like Stryker and I just was like, did they just make it happen because they knew these people? Because I always wondered how the whole red tape thing worked compared to like the big two with Image, where you guys could just be like, hey, yeah, we took care of it. You don't have to worry about it.
It really is that. Like Tim and I, between the two of us, know pretty much everyone in comics. And so like, he works for Todd McFarlane sometimes. So he knows those guys over there. And I, years ago, like colored some stuff for Top Cow. And so I still know Elena, who works at Top Cow. And I just email her and say like, hey, we want to use Stryker. Or in the new one that comes out on the 27th, we're like, hey, we want to use like every girl from Cyberforce and Witchblade too. And they're like, yeah, that's fine.
See, I'm such a sucker for that kind of stuff, man. Like, I don't know. And it's not that I'm one of those people, there's tons of people online that are like, comics used to be so good in the 90s. I'm not one of those people because I realized that comics used to be so bad. But I'm still such a sucker for it because I like cheesy, wacky comic book stuff. Like, that's my kind of vibe. And so when I see characters like Boof or Stryker in a book, it's just, that's the kind of stuff that makes me smile. That gold issue, especially the cover of it, looked like that crossover. Was it Deathmate?
Deathmate, yeah.
Whatever the Valiant crossover was. And that was like a cover buy. I feel like a lot of your books for me are cover buys, which I don't mean that as an insult. I'm just like, I got to pick that up. No, I think the double cover of Local Man, I gotta pick it up because that just calls to me, and then I end up loving the interior too.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I think we back it up. We always like I do a lot of sort of like commercial crass cover shit, where we're like Farrell has like 5 covers per issue or whatever, like for different 1 in 10, 1 in 25, stuff like that. But I do feel like we're coming to play with the interiors as well. It's not like, it's just like a trick that we pulled on somebody with all these covers.
Yeah, that's a forever comic trope. It was like covers look great, and then the inside will have a completely different artist, and you're like, why did I buy this?
That was always a bummer.
Well, the fun thing, I mean, we do some of that on Local Man because we've been hiring all these guys from the 90s to do the back covers of the book. Like since issue 2, like Tim did the front and back covers of the first one, and me. Like on the covers, me and Tim always collaborate. Like it'll be like he'll draw the super stuff and I'll draw the regular stuff on every cover. But for the back covers, we always get like, we had like Todd Knock from Extreme Studios and Ruth, and like the next one that's coming out has Will Portasio. Just a ton of these guys that like drew the Image comics in the 90s that we loved. We had Jim Valentino from Shadowhawk. So
Mm.
so it's in that way, sometimes I feel like we are promising something that's not on the inside, because you'll see
Yeah.
like this, Wills Portasio cover, and then you open it up and it just looks like a comic about a sad, beat up old ex superhero.
When
Yeah,
you're
it delivers though, man.
Thank you.
when you're working collaboratively on that art, is this like a digital thing? Are you all digital going back and forth? Okay. I
Yeah,
was curious if it's like the postal service. Y'all are going old school and sending
yeah.
them back and forth.
That's how they did it with like Image United and stuff. And I think that's probably why at the end of the day that comic never finished, because it just got to the point where it's like, this is a real, you know,
Yeah.
this is a FedEx nightmare. But yeah, Tim and I
Yeah.
both draw the book in Procreate on iPads. So it's real easy to just like work on it. And at the end of the night, just upload it to Dropbox, and then he grabs it and does his thing. And it's very, very easy to collaborate with him on this book. The only thing that he won't do is I like to write the scripts. I write all my scripts in Google Docs, and he's 2 years older than me. So he's just like stuck on Microsoft Office. I can't get him to give. I'm like, it's exactly the same, but it's just on Google Docs. You can just open it up wherever on your phone, wherever.
It's also free. It's
Yeah.
free.
Yeah, all right. If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
That's
Yeah.
right.
That's great. We talked about how Stray Dogs kind of tied us all together. I made Simon read it. I thought I was going to break his heart. I didn't. And I'm hoping
It's no we three.
Farrell. Yeah, we three was it's too much.
Rough. That thing is brutal.
Yeah.
I read that the night or the day after I saw Guardians of the Galaxy 3. So I was like,
Yeah.
I can't do any more of this, man. You
Yeah.
gotta lighten
Yeah,
up.
we did a combo review. We did a review of Guardians, and then we did a review of We, and then we're just like depressed after.
Yeah, that's
Oh man. I'm hoping Farrell will live up to the challenge. It looks great. I am more of a cat person, so I'm definitely gonna pick this up. Let's talk about it, man.
Let's
You want
talk.
to tell us a little bit about the premise?
Yeah,
What inspired this story?
did you see PDFs or anything, or you're
I
just
didn't see PDFs yet. I got the previews, and then I have the sort of the press releases and stuff like that.
cool? Yeah, well, so the story is it's three indoor cats that find themselves lost in the middle of the woods during this massive rabies outbreak. And so it's the setup sort of makes it like a zombie story for cats. Like all the rules of zombie movies is the same in this comic. Like if they get scratched, they can get infected. If they get bit, they can get infected. And once they're bit, it's only a matter of time before they too become the sort of like mindless, crazy, aggressive infected types. We call them the bad kind.
Hmm.
But yeah, we did Stray Dogs, and we like, you guys read it, that when you get to the end of it, there's no more, like everybody's okay now. Everybody that survived, there's no more.
Yeah.
And so there's really no more comic then at that point, like unless I just did another couple of arcs of just those dogs having a nice time being like getting adopted
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. Or like beat down on them and they get adopted by even worse
Even worse.
person.
Well, we thought
Yeah.
about that. We thought about doing like a copycat killer, but like we were just so happy with the way Stray Dogs came out and the way it was received, and Trish and I both felt like a certain pride with that thing. We're just like, this is sort of good. Like, you can just let that be. It's nice to, again, with Image, you can do whatever you want. We just said it's done. It's only 5, and then it can just live forever. Like that. We did the Dog Days, the follow up, but that's pretty much it. But so we wanted to figure out a way to do something that we could do that would just go on and on. And so when we landed on this idea, it was like, oh, we could do, you start thinking about like different stories that could happen to these cats out in this wilderness, or out, like, it's not just wilderness too, because it ends up being like the whole world they can get to. And this infection that they're dealing with in the forest, as we sort of like go deeper into the story, we sort of see how much further it's affecting the outside world too.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It seems from what I've got, I've only got the preview images, so it's like the first 8 pages. It feels kind of like a homeward bound type story, but like terrifying.
Yeah.
Is there any sort of like, we talked about the inspirations for Stray Dogs. Were there any specific inspirations for Feral?
Now, Homeward Bound definitely, like all of those. There seem like there's like a whole genre where dogs get lost and then they find their way home.
Yeah.
Wasn't Milo and Otis like that? Is that what that
Milo and
was?
Otis was Benji. There's like
Yeah.
at least one of the Benjis was that where he has to traverse his way home across some sort of long distance. Yeah, all of that stuff. But the main inspiration was just like I love zombie movies and like weirdly The Walking Dead is the thing that I have sort of like the least experience with. I read up until that one where he said we are the Walking Dead, and then I was like, damn,
Yeah.
they got me.
That's a good ending. Yeah.
But for whatever reason I didn't keep up after that, and then when I had this idea I was like, well, I'm not going to dip right back in right now because it seems like I want to come up with my come to my own conclusions for a little bit. But
Yeah. Did I come up with this, or did I take influence from Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I love like obviously the George Romero stuff and like the Italian zombie stuff, the Fulci stuff, and then
Yeah.
modern stuff, 28 Days Later, and like anything. Like if it had a zombie in it, you could get me to just go watch it, no problem. Because
Yeah.
they're always pretty great, like there's always something in there. I don't need something to be perfect from beginning to end. If it has zombies, if it has someone eating somebody in it, I'm cool.
Yeah.
You got a lot of leeway with me. So a lot of it is just like me thinking about that type of stuff. And then how does that work with cats? The main difference between obviously our story and zombie stories is that like these cats do not shoot guns. So they really just have to run or figure out other ways to deal with these other creatures, which is fun. It's like you sort of set these creative traps for yourself.
Yeah, it sounds like a big one. They can't like barricade. They don't have thumbs. They can't do any of that.
Which was the whole thing with Stray Dogs. Like
Mhm.
when we decided to tell that story from the dog's perspective, like it really opened up a whole bunch of new possibilities for horror stuff because they can't open doors. They can't.
Yeah.
They're totally helpless. And so with cats, we're not playing them exactly the same as we played the dogs. Like the cats don't have they're not forgetful. They remember everything. They like
Yeah, they're smarter than dogs.
stuff. Yeah. So they're different, but they still, like one of our cats we find out is like declawed, so like what's that mean for how they can survive out there,
That's our cat is declawed. That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, we picked him up. It was a similar chicken situation. My wife was like, "Hey, I found this cat. This guy doesn't want him anymore. And if we don't pick him up, then he's just going to be on the streets. He doesn't have any claws." And I'm like, that what is the response to that?
Best of both worlds, man. You got a declawed cat and you didn't even have to be the person.
Yeah, and that's how she pitched it. She was like, we're not bad because we didn't do it.
Yeah, it's secondhand. Yeah.
Ours is like, if I say no in this situation, then I'm the bad guy. So I'm like, of course, yeah.
We're getting a cat with claws at some point at that rate.
Yeah, I've been fighting it. I've been fighting it hard since. So
it's funny like that because like, we have a declawed cat and I would love to have another cat and I won't declaw it. So I'm like,
yeah,
you forget what it's like to have a regular cat that's going to scratch up all your shit.
And I've never had one. So that's my thing. It's like, don't know if I want to go into that territory.
Yeah. We had a similar thing with our dogs. We had one dog, quiet, good dog, no problems, never barks at anything unless you knock on the door. Then we got a Chihuahua. And so it's like, oh yeah, I forgot that they do this thing and bark at everything. So
yeah, my guy generally very quiet until sometimes he likes to make noise when I'm on the podcast, but every once in a while he'll just start barking at nothing. And I just gotta let him cook, I just let him be.
Yeah, we're used to it. This is an animal friendly podcast. Simon's dogs will bark. Last week my cat was jumping from all over the place trying to catch a mayfly, so we're used to it.
Yeah, my wife comes home and she like talks to the dog in the baby language as loud as she can, so that's why I was on mute because I heard her coming and I texted her, I'm podcasting right now, and then she opened the door and scared the hell out of me. So
I'm on it. Oh my gosh, Feral sounds great. Is it going to be a similar I didn't see how many issues it was playing. Is it going to be
ongoing? We're going to do it for as long as we possibly can.
Hell yeah, that's way exciting, man.
Yeah, that was the main thing. Like like I said, we were bummed that we had sort of had an ending in sight for Stray Dogs when it was coming up. And so with this one, we basically planned it to be something that we could, like, we know what the ending is, but as like we can take our time getting there. So
Yeah.
There's something
I think
really,
that works really well in zombie stories too.
yeah,
yeah.
Like as long as you know the ending, you can kind of play in that in between for as long as you can.
yeah. And I'm sure by the time we get to the ending, it'll sort of have evolved and changed. That always tends to happen where you like, I think I know where I'm going, and then right when I get there, I'm like, oh, wait a minute, and then you get to you feel like you're taking this big risk, changing this thing that only you or me and Trish know about.
Yeah.
I do like the idea of a self. That's one of the reasons why I like the trades. Is just having
Yeah.
this self-contained story that you don't have. Because as someone who doesn't normally collect comics on a weekly basis or monthly basis, it's like, oh, I don't have like all this to catch
Yeah.
up on. But I love the idea of the continuing story. That it should be really interesting. So
Thanks, man. Well, the plan basically is, every trade, we still think of them as like beginning, middle, and end stories. If somebody
Yeah.
picks up like volume 2 of Feral, it should still be pretty satisfying as a full story. But yeah, it's just like they don't solve zombieism or rabies at the end of the first
Yeah.
trade. So
Yeah.
it's able to just sort of keep going.
Yeah.
Spoilers,
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah, right. There would be times that I would want to read an X-Men trade that, throughout the years of the past 8 years or whatever.
Yeah.
And I couldn't do it with Simon because it's like, well, if we read one trade, then we have to read these 5 other trades and this tie-in trade and these other 5 books just so you can understand what's going on. So and that's really why we typically only reviewed Image, IDW, Boom books
Feels
because it
like
was jump in.
with Marvel and DC, it's almost like the omnibus is the new trade. Like, if
Yeah.
you want to read a whole
Yeah.
story, it's an omnibus. The trade
Yeah.
is
Those
just
things
like
suck to read.
they're so heavy.
That's
Look
to read,
at my
man.
little tiny wrist. Like, I can't be holding like that.
Yeah. I cannot do. They suck to read. I'm excited about Feral, man. It looks good. And it's the same. I was about to say animation style because that's just what it feels like. They
Yeah.
feel like those cell sheets. I weirdly like to collect cells from old animated series,
Yeah.
and so it just looks like that. Like the every kind of panel sort of looks like it's layered the same way that old animation cells are.
Yeah. Trish and I are both into that type of stuff too. And we specifically designed it to look like that. Like on the first book, we told the colorist Brad, like, render out all the backgrounds, and then when we do the
Mhm.
characters, they're just flat colors because we want them to look like animation cells, like no
Yeah.
shadows, no rendering on them, just like flat colors every time. And then on the second series, Tone Rodriguez, who had done like rough backgrounds on the first one and layouts, we sort of upgraded him into drawing full backgrounds. So you notice when you see like those first pages of Feral, like the backgrounds are so detailed and so
Yeah.
over the top. So it's just basically him doing a lot more, going crazier on this one. And then you definitely get a lot more of that feeling where the backgrounds are so rendered and so detailed, and then just these cute little cats on top of it. So yeah, I'm glad that came through. I'm glad that worked. I've got
Yeah.
I know Trish has like some chipmunks animation cells. I've got one from Ewoks, and then I have
nice.
one from MC Scat Cat and Paulette.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
See, I've been window shopping a ton I'm a huge Ninja Turtle fan. And so I've been window shopping like there's like weird miscolorations on the old animated series. So I've just been trying to get the best ones I can find from that old series.
Do you want
And
them miscolored, or do you want the correct ones?
the miscolored, I'm weird when it comes to like that's the thing. People like I collect comic books, but the most outside of like Amazing Spider-Man, the most complete collection I have is like Madman.
Okay.
Like I got like quirkier, weird.
Yeah.
Like that's just the kind of comics like I do like the quote unquote gritty and like serious stuff. But I just for me, I'm like I like DuckTales. I like Madman. I like the wacky kind of corny comic book stuff. And so that's really what I collect when I'm looking at back issues.
Nice.
I'm weird.
Madman.
I'm weird.
I mean, we're all comic
Weird
book
dude.
people here.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm and less so.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Fully normal toy collector.
Yeah, totally,
What do you
totally,
get?
totally normal.
one book that I think Simon's going to really get a kick out of, and I'm really, really excited about this one that you have coming up through Boom,
Yeah.
right? Uncanny Valley. You want to tell us a little bit about Uncanny Valley so we dive into it?
Yeah, it's a story about a kid who he's like 12 years old. It's just him and his mom. She's a traveling nurse, and so they move around a lot. He never really sort of gets to settle into one place. He always feels out of place. He's always trying to make friends and stuff, and he sort of feels like he feels different. And he feel, like all kids sort of do when they're that age. He just feels like something's different about him and something's weird about him. But then weird things start happening, and he just sort of, it sort of makes him feel ashamed and weird, so he's just not saying anything about it. But then in the first issue of the comic, he sort of like him and his mom get put in this like dangerous situation. They're attacked by these birds, and as we sort of like get closer to the birds, we realize that like it feels like the birds are cartoons and they're talking. And then
Yeah.
the boy and his mom get rescued in a real like come with me if you want to live type moment by a cartoon character who he finds out is his grandpa. So it's a story. It's basically like a Percy Jackson type story, but instead of Greek gods, it's like Cartoon Network. Like
Yeah.
this kid finds out that the whole cartoon world is real and it sort of exists alongside our world, and there's this whole big like massive like cartoon world that he has no idea about, and the stories about him sort of like discovering his place in that world, and maybe the reason that he always felt like he didn't fit in was because he fits in somewhere else.
Yeah. And this book, I feel like, was made specifically for me. I mean, this is right up. I don't know what the inspiration's for. We'll talk about it, but I'm a huge Roger Rabbit fan. So
Yeah.
when I read the premise of this one, I was like, and first of all, like growing up feeling like an outcast, being a super nerd,
Yeah.
this was like right up my alley. So what, Roger Rabbit, was it an inspiration? What other things were?
Yeah, for sure. Roger Rabbit, I remember it came out in 88, so I was 9 years old. I know I saw it in the movie theater, and I remember seeing it. And after I got out of it, I was just like, well, that's how movies are now. Now that they've figured out how to do this. I thought it was like when movies went from black and white to color, right?
Yeah.
Now they're just all in color. I thought like the next movie I see, of course, cartoons will show up. This is going to be great. Everything's better now. We made it.
Yeah.
And then,
Why would you go back?
exactly. And they never did, like every once in a while we get like a Page Master or like a Space Jam or something, like
Yeah.
World, but it never took off like I thought it was going to. And so it was just always something that I loved. I like when I was growing up, there wasn't Cartoon Network yet. So you had cartoons like in the morning before school, there would be some cartoons. And then in the afternoon, there would be some cartoons. And then Saturday morning, there would be some cartoons. But otherwise, it was real like seek and find. Like, like I remember we could go to the video store and we could rent a tape that had like 2 episodes of Thundercats on it, and like that's how you would see. And I remember Bewitched, the TV show.
Oh, yeah.
That had a cartoon opening, and I remember just waiting around for that. Like that was cartoon,
like fiending so bad. I need to see the intro.
Just give me a taste. Just give me something.
We grew up in the era of Cartoon Network, so we were lucky. But early on, and before, like the Batman the animated series and things like that really kicked off,
in the dark times.
It was a similar thing though. I remember weirdly Super Friends would show at like 6 a.m. on TBS or something crazy weird.
Yeah.
And I would have to get up just to watch Super Friends. And Super Friends isn't that great if you think about like compared to the other cartoons that were out at the time of the mid 90s. But I loved
Superman and
comic
Batman
book
together. Come on.
I loved it. So I would be up at 6 a.m. on like a random Saturday just to watch it. And it's the same thing before they started like, this is, we have a kids block on Saturday.
Yeah.
Before that happened, you had to search it, or you had to have a friend that had a VCR that would record it, and then you could go over to his house and watch all the episodes.
Did you guys they would like sell it like, Walgreens or whatever, like a 6-hour long tape of just cartoon. It would just be called cartoons.
Yep.
I had the
Yeah,
These would be like
absolutely.
Looney Tunes and Tom and Jerry and what like the most bootleg
Yeah.
public domain shit. But yeah, we would just sit there and stare at. I come from a big family, and so even after I had sort of grown, when I should have grown out of cartoons,
Yeah.
I was an artist and I loved like I wanted to make cartoons, so I was still in it. And then all my brothers and sisters are younger than me, so they were always just still watching the cartoons, even up until like when I moved out of the house. Like it was always
Same.
a real cartoon world that I lived in. So yeah, this book for me is a lot about that. It's that plus two comics, Planetary, and that has this sort of like underlying theme of everything that you know from sci-fi and comic books and action movies, horror movies, and all that's real and it exists like under the surface. I thought about like, what if we did that, but it's cartoons, like what if all the
Yeah.
stuff we know from cartoons happened and is real and it's just all like in this cartoon world that exists under the surface. And
It's
then
right up my alley, man. I
but you're
mean,
gonna dig
I
it.
can't I
I,
can't wait for this to come out.
I'm really proud of it. And I'm so excited that it's soon too. Like Feral and Uncanny Valley are from two different publishers who do not, like talk to each other. So
Yeah.
so for whatever reason, they just come out like weeks apart from each other, which is stressful when you're trying to promote
I
stuff.
would I would bet, yeah.
And when you're trying to
I
make
would bet.
stuff, like it's a lot to juggle, but it's nice that it's I can just sort of talk about all this stuff at the same time and have it all be out there at the same time. But the other
Yeah.
comic that really inspired it is, did you ever read Fire Breather?
I love Fire Breather, yeah.
Yeah. So Fire Breather is about a kid that his mom is a lady and his dad is like a giant dragon. And so
Kirkman did that, right?
no, what Kirkman put Fire Breather in like guarding the globe and stuff. It was
That's what it is. That was my introduction to him.
it was Phil Hester and Andy Kuhn. Phil
That's right.
wrote it, and Andy Kuhn, Ninja Turtles drew it.
Yeah. I think that was my intro was through the Invincible world.
Yeah, but it's such a great story, and just the creativity of like this kid's this kid's mom met because I know Phil Hester, and he wrote it as a Fin Fang Foom pitch that he pitched to Marvel. It was like, what if
Yeah.
Fin Fang Foom had a son who was like a boy, but like half dragon, half man. Or
How could you pass that up?
I mean, look, Marvel's made a lot of boneheaded mistakes in their day, and this is just one of
Yeah.
them.
Jeez.
But
No
yeah,
one cares about Fin Fang Foom. That would be the
that'd be
perfect
amazing.
book.
So
We talked about Planetary, and Simon, he got a little taste of Planetary. We read there was like a Batman tie-in
yeah.
where they go through they're chasing the antagonist, and then they go through all these different versions of Batman.
Yeah, it's like the
And
TV
so
version and the original version. Yeah.
I actually reviewed it with a toy reviewer, D Amazing. He came on the show when Lex was out one time, so we went through the first volume as well. And yeah, that was such a great story. I love like alt history stuff, and also just the idea. I love like Great Value brand characters. Like
Yes,
they're like the same, but we're not going to call it that, And so that was super cool. It's just nice to be like, ah, yes, I see. It's
I
familiar.
see what you're doing. Yeah. Dave Wachter, who draws it, is really great at that. It's sort of synthesizing those, we call them Kmart brand. Like when I pitch in the story, it doesn't say Yosemite Sam in the script, but like when we're
it's
developing
definitely
characters, I'm saying,
Sam.
it's what if was that, and so he comes
And
up.
some of those characters you can pull off so well, like that Yosemite Sam character, that you don't need to actually have Yosemite Sam in there. You know what I mean? Like it has the same effect as just having an analog.
Yeah. And people bring that with them when they're reading it, like if the analog is drawn close enough, then they sort of bring all that Yosemite Sam baggage with them into it, and you sort of, get to have your cake and eat it too, or whatever.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this one, man.
Thanks.
Uncanny Valley is a thing that Simon and I used to joke about a lot too. It's just like seeing Uncanny Valley things.
Yeah.
And so when I first heard the title, I was like, oh well, I got to pick it up off of that. And then I saw the cover, and I was like, well, yeah, my man. And then I read those preview images, and I was like, well, this. I just called my shop and was like, yeah, go ahead and put it on my pull list.
Thank you. Yeah. What's the most Uncanny Valley shit you've seen? Like what? What's the worst offender?
Simon, what do we? I don't even remember what we first started talking about Uncanny Valley stuff with.
To me, like some of that, I think some of the most like icky stuff is like thinking about like the spirits within or whatever that Final Fantasy movie one.
Yeah,
That one's like uncomfortable to
creepy.
watch.
Yeah,
Yeah, the
Yeah,
CGI is really good, but like
yeah,
not good enough.
yeah. There's the Scorpion King. That's
Oh
creepy.
my God, yeah, yeah,
There's all that stuff from around that time. Although, what I find happens is I'll rewatch stuff and like your eyes get more sophisticated. Like I remember
yeah,
when I saw CGI Yoda in the movie theater. I was like, Jesus Christ, he looks exactly like
yeah,
Yoda. He's so real. And
yeah.
then
yeah, yeah, yeah.
now you watch it on streaming or on DVD or whatever, and it's just like, oh man, he looks so slimy and weird.
I think about that with all the clone troopers. I remember first seeing that and finding out that there was never a clone armor, like real. None of these things are real, right?
Yeah,
They're all CGI. I remember watching the Clone Wars or whatever, episode 2, and thinking, wow, man, this is the future. And
yeah, they
now
did it.
again, you watch it and you're like, oh,
This is not the future.
yeah,
Yeah,
so close.
yeah. Weird Sonic the Hedgehog is definitely in that, falls.
Yeah, I think I think that Chip and Dale movie that they recently did
Huh?
it very well. Like when they joked about the Uncanny Valley stuff, they had Sonic in there.
Oh yeah,
They
yeah.
had some of these like game characters that didn't really fit into the world.
They look off in the wrong direction and stuff.
Yeah, yeah, perfect. I'm really excited about this one. I know Sam will probably pick this one up too.
Yeah, that one is on order. I don't know when this comes out, but if it comes out before Monday, that one is on. You can still order it up until this Monday at your shop, and it comes out on April 10th. So Feral,
And Pharaoh comes out in March
yeah, it
or
comes out the
May. I mean
27th, March. Comes out March 27th.
March.
So it's almost out.
Yeah.
And then Local Man Bad Girls comes out the same day. And then somewhere in there, I believe more Army of Darkness comes out. And then Uncanny Valley comes out on April 10th. Literally have months where something comes out every week this coming summer, like a lot. Because I just been sort of working constantly, and I think I'm about to fall down. Like I'm about to screw it all.
Right.
I've been keeping up okay, but this
I was about to ask, how's that feel, man? Like you hit Stray Dogs, knocked it out of the park, and like you said, you got all these opportunities, and now you're just busy. Like you're just like nonstop. How does it feel? Like a double-edged sword, I guess.
it definitely is. I mean, it's my dream come true. So on
Yeah.
that hand, on the one hand, it's incredible, and on the other hand, it's like I have friends that say like the you don't understand the power of saying no to something, and I'm always just like, I don't
Not
know.
yet.
I feel like I have too much imposter syndrome or too much whatever, where it's like if I say no, they'll be like, okay, well, we'll see you never.
That's it.
Yeah,
That's
hang up the
it.
phone forever.
Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
sorry. I think
No,
after this summer, I will take a bit of a breather. Feral sold well enough that like, hopefully we can just make that for a little bit. And
Yeah.
like all the like Army of Darkness is 12 issues, and Uncanny Valley is at least the first story is planned. Well, it's solicited as 6 issues, but hopefully we'll do 12. And then at the end of
Mm.
we may do more after that, but I can sort of take a breather. And so it's weird thinking of like, I'll take a day off in like July, August.
Yeah. That's
how
crazy.
how is that from from the outside? We don't quite understand how the industry works. So how is that? Like, what kind of lead time do you have? Are you like setting aside like 8 hours of your day? This is what I'm doing for 8 hours, and then, or do you just like until it's done?
Until it's done. Yeah, I
Yeah.
have friends that are better at sort of like compartmentalizing and really locking in and getting stuff done. But especially when it gets hectic like this, it's just like I just have to keep rolling all the time. And the promotional part of it, like this type of thing, this isn't promotional, obviously. I'm just talking to 2 new friends here, but the other
Mm.
podcast that I go on, that's all commercial and promotional.
Yeah.
But like I have to take time out of my day to like make graphics that say like, don't forget to order, and all this other stuff that isn't just the making of the comics. There's a lot of emailing.
Yeah.
So yeah, when it gets hectic like this, when I'm working on 5 comics at the same time, it is just, I wake up, I start working on it, and then I try not to get too distracted, and I just try and go as hard as I can until I get sleepy.
It's
Fall
crazy.
asleep with a pen in my hand.
Yeah,
Stylist.
it's happened for sure.
It's crazy. You mentioned Bad Girls. That's the annual
Yeah.
for Local Man, right?
Yeah, Local Man, that's the same thing as Gold was. We do an arc, and
Okay.
then we'll do a special to sort of like bring people in and hopefully introduce new readers to the book before the next arc starts. So
Yeah.
Girls is like a one shot that's about all of the girls from Local Man and sort of like shows some history of them and shows some like reveals some secrets, and then also sets up stuff for the next arc.
That's something that you guys really did well with Gold. I wouldn't say it's new reader friendly, but I feel like someone that hasn't read Local Man could read it and still get the entertainment of enjoying a book. You know what I mean? And it had the sort of teaser type things at the end of it. And so, really rare. I don't read a lot of annuals anymore.
I don't know, do they do?
Not that I know of. I think they do them for like books that I do pay attention to. Like I know Ninja Turtles does an annual.
Okay, yeah.
I don't know about the big two.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes they'll do like an annual initiative where they'll bring them back sometimes, but
Yeah.
growing up they would do them every year, and it would be like a
All the big titles had them.
yeah. Then they would cross over.
I think Ninja Turtles is the only one that I've noticed that has an annual. Like the last Ninja Turtle annual I read was a couple of years ago, actually. It was by Juni Ba. They just let him write it, illustrate it, and that was it.
Yeah.
So it's like a completely edit. But I don't think the big two do them. Now they're doing more like monthly, like Black History Month. They'll do like Pride Month. They'll do like these monthly specials.
Yeah, they do a lot of one-shot issues, but yeah, it seems like they're more just random. They scattered randomly through the year for different stuff like that than just an annual initiative. Yeah.
And I think that's what pulled me into that annual of Local Man. It was like, this is what it even looks like the 90s annual. So I'm excited to pick up this new one.
Yeah, that one has like a connected cover. And we tried to. It was harder to do a Bad Girls issue in the Local Man fashion than it was to do just a crossover. Like crossover Local Man, we were like, we get what this is. Bad Girls, we just ended up. It's basically just a Local Man issue, just about the women in the Local Man story. Whereas, like when we first started talking about it, we're like, could we do it like a swimsuit issue, or should we do it like should it be like super over the top and like goth and satanic like a chaos comic, like or super religious like Glory, or or Evangeline, like really try to figure it out. And at the end of the day, we're just like, well, we just take all these characters and tell a story about them. That sort of tends to be the Local Man ways. We'll just be like, oh, we just could tell a good story, I guess.
When you guys are writing a book like Local Man, are you purely scripting it all out and then passing it off to Seeley, and then you guys share the art duties?
Yeah, so the way it works is on the first arc, that was during COVID, and so we were just sort of like in our own, he's in Chicago, I was in LA, and we sort of like figured it out as we went. Like it was a little bit improvisational. Like we had an idea what the whole thing was, and we had like an idea of what the character was and what the mystery was, but it was like a lot of it was just sort of figuring it out. And then, but for arcs 2 and for both of them, Tim has come out here and like, posted up and stayed in my guest room. And then we'll just sit and work in my studio and like bring out the whiteboard and go through and like have like a little mini summit, like a Local Man summit, and plan out the whole arc. And then Tim will write the first draft. And then usually the backup story that he writes in that is like no notes, perfect, go ahead. Like, cause he's got such a great handle on what that stuff is. I'll maybe sometimes use like 1 or 2 words, but I letter the book too. So sometimes I won't even change it until I get to lettering. But then I'll do my pass. That's what I'm going to do after we get off of this, is I have to do my pass on a Local Man issue. And then while I'm writing my draft, which is just like going through and like changing, I think this scene would work better if we did it this way or whatever. Like Tim's sort of the one who's in charge of the thrust of the thing and the plot, and I'm sort of in charge of the vibe. So like when you read the first arc, that beginning scene where Jack's just sitting on that bench, and the Uber driver comes up and talks to him and says "fuck Cross Jack," and leaves him there. Like all that stuff. He wanders into town, has to walk 10 miles. All that stuff is sort of like the vibe stuff, and then the actual plot of the book is like when he gets in there and he starts having to like gets attacked by his old nemesis, and that guy gets killed and all.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's real collaborative. Like we're sort of like we come up with the whole thing together. Tim is has written so many comics and is very disciplined about knocking out first drafts, which is grueling, shitty work. As far as all these things, the first draft, still a dream to do. Like still making comics, incredible. But if I had to pick anything to not do, it would be the first draft. So it works great on this that I don't have to do that. So yeah, then once I finish my draft, I'll just basically start drawing my side, and then I've sort of like put it off until the last minute, and so I'll be cranking right up until the day that it's due, which is what I'm gonna be doing this time. So like this next week, like I have a week before Feral comes out, and then the week after Feral, it's like Feral signing WonderCon in Anaheim, and then the week after that is like a signing or two, and then I'm going to the East Coast to sign Ferals with Trish, who lives in Baltimore. So it's going to be real like cramming in pages of Local Man issue 10 wherever I can for the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, it sounds awesome. It does. And I also hear the sound, I hear the stress.
Yeah,
but it does sound like a dream.
Yeah,
it's
just
great.
like be able to do it.
That's all I ever wanted to do. I like it. I told you guys I was like a little kid watching cartoons. I love comic books, and I get to do it full time.
Yeah,
it's an interesting thing. Like Lex and I both dabble in illustration. I've illustrated a few children's books and stuff, and it's cool because it's like, yeah, man, I went to art school. Like I love drawing. This is great. And then you're like, but now it's like work. And so it's just a little bit of a tinge on there, like this is fantastic. This is something I've wanted to do forever. But you
really have to figure out how to love the process, because
that's it.
It's so all encompassing when it's happening. Like I'll say like this will probably take me a half hour to finish, and then I'll look up and it'll be like 6 hours later or something. I have no, once I get into that zone, I have no idea what's going on anymore. It's almost like you go into like a fugue state or something.
Yeah. The only time I realize how much time I've spent on a page or something is looking at the battery level on my iPad. I'm like, oh, it's dead. I've been here for a long time.
That's what I got too. I switch off when one starts to get in the red. I have to go switch it over to the other one so that I can keep going.
I talked about earlier how I really, really appreciate the aspect of being a writer and an artist in the industry. I mean, I feel like there's not a lot of people that pull it off well, man. How do you, and this is just purely selfish, this is purely me wanting to know some insight. It's like, how do you get in the mode of like, is there a switch between writing and illustrating, or is it kind of all the same thing? Is there a different, like, what I'm trying to say is like, how does your work process flow work in a general way?
No, there's definitely a difference. I often have to do like writing and drawing on the same day on different projects, but it's definitely not the same headspace. And if I'm planning it out correctly, I'll do all my writing early in the day, because that's the type of stuff that it helps to have. I describe it as like your brain is either wet or it's like dried out and
yeah, that makes sense.
Right. So like if I wake up in the morning and my brain is moist and shiny, I can write for until it starts to dry out. And
I get that.
Anything that happens during that day, like if I get in an argument, if I get in traffic, if I get, like if I have some sort of email crisis or something, all that starts to like dry out, like sponges out your brain. And so I really, when I'm in like crisis writing situations where I absolutely have to do something, it's almost like I have to wake up, 4 a.m. or something before the world turns on and really get going, so that nothing can stop me before I get, my 5 pages done or whatever it is I need to get done. And then art, because I've done so much of it. I mean, I don't know how many issues of comics I've drawn at this point, but and that just sort of comes more naturally to me, and I sort of trust the process of it more. And I, just from having done it successfully so many times, I know that I can just sort of like pick up and do it, and it's at least going to be of X quality, right? Like,
Yeah.
even if I screw it up real hard, it'll at least be publishable, ish image. Like,
Yeah.
nobody tells us no. So if I draw
Yeah.
that looks awful, nobody's going to be like, redraw that. We just keep it pushing. So that I can do if I'm, exhausted or stressed out or whatever. And that even sort of helps the stress, because it is almost like my
Yeah.
security blanket or whatever, like if I'm having a shit day, I can pick up the iPad, or if I'm doing it on paper, I can get down to paper and just get into that same place where I used to relax when I was a kid, or
Yeah, I get that.
even as an adult, or, whenever I'm drawing, I feel comfortable. And so that, that's better to do at the end of the day.
When you have someone that writes that is an illustrator, it just feels more fluid. Like, it flows better, in my opinion. And so that's why I kind of gravitate towards those books. Like, you'll hear me do a review of one of your books or one of Daniel Warren Johnson's books, and I'm just like, hey guys, I'm gonna love it. So
Yeah.
if you want to just cut to the end, yeah, I'm just gonna fawn over this for a little bit if you just want to avoid this episode.
Even when I write stuff for somebody else, like when I write Army of Darkness or Uncanny Valley, or Feral and Stray Dogs are technically for somebody else. For those books, I do thumbnails. So like sort of the pacing of it is
that was my next question.
Up to me as well. But I'm always thinking about it in terms of like page turns and rhythm and pacing and stuff like that, because of how I drew comics for years that other people wrote. And some of them would think about that type of stuff, but I would always, as an artist on it, I would try and make the page move as much as possible, but you're not being in charge of what the words are and how many of them are in a panel or whatever could be really frustrating when I was just drawing stuff. And so now that I have that I'm in charge of the writing on these things, it definitely is something that I think about a lot, is about the like how it all fits together, and how I feel I have an advantage over people that don't draw, that just write, where I can visualize it a lot more and sort of, I don't know, hopefully.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Do you prefer one over the other? I know that's probably an easy question.
When I'm stressed out like this, it's definitely faster to write stuff than it is to draw stuff. Like I can write an issue in the time it takes me to draw like a cover or 2.5 pages or something, So
yeah.
So, writing is my favorite in that regard. But I've when I get a good drawing off, when I feel something really worked, or just like, sometimes I have to do them so fast too. And when we do a beginning to end and it just works out and I like it, it's something really satisfying about that. And I don't second guess it as much as I do with writing, because you can see it. It's like why people used to say it was easier for artists to get jobs in comics than writers, because you can just show it to somebody and go like, see, I can do it.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. Like when something is drawn well, even I can recognize that it worked out. Also, when something sucks and it has to still go out and I have to see it forever, that hurts more than I had a typo or or wrote something that was a little clunky,
Yeah.
How do you limit yourself on something like that? So you have your time limits and stuff, and let's say that you're drawing and you get to a point you're like, oh, it's just it's not looking like I want it to look, but I've got to move on. Like, how do you limit yourself in that space?
Well, luckily the publisher will limit you. You had to turn it in, or the book's going to be late. And then if the book's late, it's oftentimes returnable. And so you're like actually messing with your own money at that point. And so I just, from having done it for so long, I was always a deadline guy when I was working on those kids comics and stuff. And so it's the same deal now. Like I just figure out how to be okay with it, and how to, sometimes especially Local Man, where I'm writing it too. Sometimes I'll write myself a page where it's like, this is all heads, so we can.
Is writing on Local Man, because you're illustrating as well, do you think that, do you love or do you enjoy the process of that? Is it still like you have a writing mode and then you go into illustration, or do you kind of mix the two?
No, I definitely have a writing mode and then I go into illustration on that. We're mixing it a little more on Feral right now, weirdly,
Yeah.
where because I had been writing the script and then drawing thumbnails and then sending that to the artists. And for the last couple of issues, we were trying out just doing the thumbnails and then lettering over them.
Yeah.
So just like trying stuff out. But when I'm doing Local Man, just because me and Tim both write it, like it's easier to just do it script first and then draw it from there. But I
Yeah,
can't,
that makes sense.
like I said, I can do, where if a page has like 6 panels on it and it looks like a lot, I can sort of see if there's a way to chop it down to 4 or something, and if I know it's going to be a crunch.
Like Simon mentioned, we're both would-be illustrators. We've been romanticizing it since we were kids, and
you guys make comics together?
We did. We made a comic a long time ago. It's not very good,
Yeah.
but we've always, danced around like just doing it, like not for job, not for whatever, just for the sake of doing it. Maybe it's a midlife crisis. Maybe for me, maybe it's a midlife crisis. Maybe it's something, but just putting it out there. And so when I wanted to interview creators that I am a huge fan of, it's actually kind of like secretly selfish, as I mentioned, right? So for any aspiring comic book creators that might be listening, I think any comic book fan is secretly like an aspiring comic book creator. Any advice that you have?
Yeah, what I always say is, I mean, all the people that I looked up to would always say, like, if you want to make comics, just make comics, which I felt was like, cool, but like a little bit, if I was sitting at home just like, okay, but how? Like, what do you mean?
Yeah, just give me one step.
Yeah. But so like the addition to that I think helps is you don't have to make a full comic. You just have to start, like, have a plan to finish a thing. But if you just make it a point to do one thing for it every day, then you just sort of like move forward towards it. So like when I was starting out and I had like nothing was propelling me to make this stuff except myself, it would be like, all right, well, today I'll, write that story, or I'll start, I'll outline that story, or whatever size of the thing you feel like you can handle based on, like, do you have a job that's hectic? Do you have kids or whatever? It's like, well, you can do, you can sit there with Post-its and go like, all right, this will be 5 panels, and you put together like a little, take bite-sized bites, and then eventually you'll get through the whole thing, and just make it a point, like if you're going to do it, just make it a point to say, like, I'm just going to do one thing for this thing every day, and that sort of, and then you get to the end of, a month or 6 months or whatever, and you finished a thing just by, always pushing forward. I mean, don't cut yourself too much slack. Don't be like, well, I went in there and I put some lines on this guy's jaw and that was enough for today,
Yeah.
Push
up so I can eat a hamburger now.
That's right. Yeah. It seems so overwhelming.
I love it.
The idea of making something, but when you think about it just as, like every comic is just a collection of pages, and every page is a collection of panels, and every panel is just a collection of drawings. So it's like, just start granular and eventually you just keep pushing and you get it done.
That's great.
I love it. I think that's great advice, man. Tony, I think we did it.
We did it. This is great.
I think we did it.
I do have 2 questions.
I mentioned.
I'm sorry. I have 2 questions.
Go ahead before I wrap it up.
I was waiting for the wind down to ask these. Would you say, 2 questions. 1, would you say that the C or the S is silent in your last name?
The C is silent.
And then you said you collected some kind of toys. What would you say? I mean, like, what kind? What's your poison?
Well, so I was hardcore on Star Wars. I have all of the Kenner ones, including droids and Ewoks. Like, I don't have the Vlix toy, but I have like a recreation of it. So I have all of that. And then the other stuff that I'll get is just, usually it's like some comic that I like. If there's like a weird character from it, I'll end up getting that. I like the McFarlane toys a lot of the time. I'll get some of those. I don't have so many that like just my office is covered in toys, but more like there's a few randomly placed key toys here and there,
Yeah, I think that's how I am, kind of. I have a weird collection of things that my son doesn't play with anymore, or that I got from Simon. Luckily, Simon is like a toy photographer, legit toy photographer, collector, and so I'll either get his hand-me-downs or I could live vicariously through him. So I'm perfectly fine saving all of my
Now, do
money.
you customize too, or do you just photograph?
I have started customizing some. I right now I build dioramas and stuff. That's kind of where I spend a lot of my time. I built like this tube thing. It's like a bridge.
Yeah.
I built that last week, but
Do you know Ibrahim Mustafa? Do you know him?
no, I don't.
He's a comic artist too. He's done a bunch of stuff for Marvel and DC, and he's for the last few years he's been doing like his own graphic novels at Humanoids. But he has this YouTube channel where he customizes sometimes, but he a lot of times builds dioramas like that because he likes to have like a spot for his cool customized figures to hang out. So I would be interested.
Damn, that's awesome.
I would hope you would see him and just be like, "This sucks." So I could tell my buddy, like, "Oh, I met this real toy photographer. And he said your stuff."
Well, and I feel like that's pretty generous. I've done so I collect a lot of this brand called Mezco, and I get selected every once in a while for their Fan Feature Friday thing on their newsletter. They selected me for the launch of one of their first party characters. They send some things out to influencers, for lack of a better word. And
your influencer name Simon Toast?
yeah.
You're good, man. Simon undersells himself. He's good, man.
But I rarely get paid. I get some free stuff, and that's I'm happy there. But
I'm gonna text him and find out. We don't have to wait for him to text back, but I'm gonna hear later on if he knows who you are.
okay.
Do you know Simon Toast?
Yeah, I'm very active on Instagram. That's kind of that's my happy place. I find that Facebook nobody cares, and Twitter nobody really cares either. So, but anyway, yeah, I was just curious, and I feel like that's the best kind of collector. I feel like you really have it under control, so that's great.
Well, that's what I thought until when I was moving last time. I put all my Star Wars toys. I have like 4 tubs of them stacked up, and so I had to pack everything to move. And then when I got to this new house, Star Wars had started to like over Star Wars everything. Like there was just way too much Star Wars all the time.
Yeah.
And it sort of sapped my like I was even in, around Rise of Skywalker, I was still like, this is fine, like same way with the prequels, like it's okay,
Yeah.
But once it was like Boba Fett and stuff, and fucking, I think there's some I haven't even seen at this point. I start watching them, I was like,
Time.
this seems a little cornier. And so
yeah,
they're all still in the crate. So
I find that, yeah, not to go on too much of a tangent, they and this is the problem with extending that stuff. Mandalorian was cool when it first came out, and then they just they're like, this sells toys, they make it way overly toyetic. I do like Ahsoka. That was pretty cool show. I
like that.
Kind of brought it back.
Andor was great.
Yeah, that one was great. Because it's like, this doesn't have to be Star Wars. It just happens to be Star Wars.
Yeah.
It's just a decent, it's a good show.
But yeah, I have a real weakness for the Star Wars toys. Actually, today I just picked up a Star Killer that they had just because I was like, I guess I got to get it. It's right there,
Yeah.
See, I avoided the 6-inch, what are they called? Black Series?
Yeah.
I avoided those when they started coming because I was like, look, I'm 3 and a quarter, was it 3 3/4, 3 1/4?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's me. I'm Kenner size. And so when those new ones started coming out, I resisted entirely. I might have 1 or 2 of them. And if I had gone down that path, I would have 4 much larger size crates as well to go with my other.
I think that's my problem why I don't collect toys, is because I don't know if it's OCD, I don't know if I'm a completionist, but it's the same thing with like comic series. I collect and I have to I can't not finish a series.
Yeah. I've managed to, like, I'm not a completionist, so I'm thankful for that, but I also love so many different things.
What's that like? It seems nice.
Yeah.
He says he's not, but he has like 12 sets of turtles.
Well, no, okay. Like if I'm gonna collect something, it's gonna be turtles. Like I have movie 1, movie 2, movie 3, the Mezco ones that just came out, the newer Mirage ones. I mean, they're good. But yeah, that 3 3/4, the problem is now that they use that 3D printing technology and the face scans and stuff. And so I fell into that because I'm like, well, they're cheaper. They used to
Yeah.
be anyway. They've
All
almost
right.
jacked the price up on all those. But yeah, I bought the Mandalorians, the N1 fighter or whatever, the vintage collection of
Yeah.
that. It's stupid. It's all dumb.
Tell you what used to always get me with toys was when they would put out, because I loved Star Wars and I loved cartoons. And so when they had Star Wars cartoons, when they had droids and Ewoks, I was like,
Yeah.
so crazy. These toys look like cartoons. And when they put out the Clone Wars line, like the Cartoon Network one, and those toys look like
Oh my
cartoons,
gosh.
I got lightheaded. I was so excited about it.
There-
And then anytime they would do it, like the Rebels toys, they would put those out and they look like cartoons. But then when they would put out the ones, when they put out like Ahsoka, but she looked like a real person,
Yeah.
like before Rosario Dawson, did not like
Yeah.
that.
No,
I'm not a
thanks.
huge fan of that either. But another one along that line that you're talking about was when they did the Transformers animated. Nobody was a huge. I don't know anybody that really loved that cartoon other than myself and Lex. And they put out those transform. Not only do they look like the cartoons when they're a robot, but they also look like the engineering
When they
behind that.
transformed.
Yeah, incredible.
But
I
anyway,
also like that. Those like just the colors on the cover always look like exactly like it's supposed to look. You know, it always feels right.
yeah. Well, thank you for.
I love
Thank you.
Hold on, we got word back from Ibrahim.
It's like nah.
He doesn't know. So I wish I wouldn't have. I feel like I let you down now.
No, it's all right.
As we are circling the drain, Tony, I appreciate you coming on, man. As I mentioned to you before we started recording, this is our first interview,
That's went
and
good. I feel like you should do more. You guys are good.
we worked through it. Both of us were nervous before. I was telling my wife, I was like, she read the book and she was like, "You're interviewing this guy," and I was like, "Thanks."
Have you heard yourself?
That's what I needed to hear.
No, I think you did.
So
Tell your wife I said you did great.
appreciate that, and we would love to have you on again. I mean, this was fun rather than like. I assume these like creator interviews are very structured and usually supposed to be very like promotional and official, but I don't know. I'm not that kind of person. I don't know how to talk like that.
Pre-order Uncanny Valley at your local comic shop before Monday. Please, by all means. And don't forget to tell your store that you want Feral every month from Image Comics and Local Man.
We usually drop these episodes on Wednesday, but we're going to drop this episode on Saturday.
This Saturday?
So that it can go out. Yeah, we're going to drop it this Saturday so it can go out. So it can go out. And I am a huge troll on the internet, so I will make a big push for this episode and try to get people to get that OC.
Thank you. That would be huge. I really appreciate it. And let me know if there's anything you need from me. If you want me to send over artwork, I just texted you my buddy Ibrahim. But if you guys want to read the new books, I can send you PDFs too.
And
awesome.
of course,
Yeah.
of course. I appreciate you taking the time to do this, man. It was a blast. I'm gonna fangirl over this after we get off of this call for a while. So
I've been holding in the tears this whole time. So
I finally got you. It wasn't my comic book work. It was just my charming,
yeah. Right. He's a sucker for
essence.
that.
Yeah.
Like so when somebody can vibe out.
Yeah, right. All right, Tony. I appreciate it, man. And hopefully you'll see you soon.
Thanks, fellas. Thanks for having me on. Have a good one.